Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in and welcome to our student live session. This week, we are discussing all things product management and answering your questions. My name is Stephanie Fong, and I'm a senior recruiter here at Salesforce with the APM program, as well as a few other technology groups here. And joining us today are our APMs, Avantika Ramesh and Katie Keller, who joined Salesforce in 2020. You will hear from both of them shortly. And if you have any questions for either of them, go ahead and start throwing all those questions into the chat window, and we'll be opening up for Q&A at the end of our session. So to kick things off here, first off, you're probably wondering what exactly is the APM program? And that stands for Associate Product Manager. It's the primary way that we hire product management intern and new grad talent here at Salesforce. In 2019, Brett Taylor, our president and chief operating officer at Salesforce, created this program. He was part of the first APM program at Google, responsible for co-creating Google Maps while he was there before moving on to become CTO at Facebook. And after founding a collaboration startup called Quip, joined as Chief Product Officer here at Salesforce, having recently been promoted to Chief Operating Officer. So now that you've got the history, we did also want to give a quick overview of what recruiting timelines look like before we dive in. Application windows for next year's cohort have closed at this time already to new candidates, but here is an outline of our recruiting timeline each year. If you are interested in applying to future cohorts, currently interviewing at any other product management style of interview, hopefully these will also be helpful for you as well through your journey. Full-time recruitment kicks off early in the year, specifically in July when the role is posted. And starting in August, the recruiting team switches gears to focus on the intern posting for applications. Interview process-wise, it starts with a recruiter phone screen to learn more about yourself, your interest in product management, and if your background's a match from there, we connect you with a product manager for a 45-minute virtual interview. As a final round, the top candidates for both intern and full-time in this process are selected by the hiring team and invited for an interview batch day, with offers extended shortly thereafter. So with that, I will go ahead and pass things off here to Avantika, who will tell us more about herself as well as her role as an APM here.
Thanks, Stephanie. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all, and thank you again for having me here. I'm Avantika Ramesh. I'm a product manager on Salesforce.org's Education Cloud team, and I've been at Salesforce for a little over a year now, which means I'm in my second year of the APM program. And before I joined Salesforce, I studied at UC Berkeley, where I did a dual degree in electrical engineering and computer science and business. And that's what led me to Salesforce. So that's a little bit about me. And I'm super excited to share with you a little bit more about the Salesforce APM program. So here's a little overview about the program at Salesforce. Salesforce has both the full-time and internship program for our APMs. And the full-time program in particular is a 2-year rotational program, which means it's meant to train new grad PMs on fundamental PM skills. And the best way to learn those is to learn by doing. So you get the opportunity to work on 3 different teams at Salesforce for 8 months each and get really hands-on with your PM knowledge. So during this time, you're not only working on various teams, but you're also able to take advantage of the robust curriculum that the APM team has put together. And that will help APMs learn critical PM skills and also learn from cross-cloud leaders and participate in several personal development sessions as well. So the cohort experience is very valuable, especially because you have a team of APMs you can lean on and get support and guidance from throughout your time here as well. Now, regarding my own experience, I've been on 2 different teams at Salesforce so far. My first team was on the Einstein Bots team, and now I'm currently on the Education Cloud team at Salesforce. So regarding the summer internship program, this is a 12-week internship program, and it's for rising seniors. And it offers essentially the same benefits and access as the full-time program, but it's in a more condensed time frame. As opposed to 2 years, you're doing this within 12 weeks. So you still have opportunities to build your APM network. You'll have access to executives and also customer exposure as well. And at the same time, you get to engage in cohort building activities with your cohort. So you get to engage in volunteering, other fun intern events. And at the end of the internship, all of your activities will culminate into a final presentation in front of our chief product officer.
Great. Thank you for that. So, our first question here, then, getting to some of the good stuff that you're wondering about. What is the best advice for someone interested in exploring product management? And also, what is one thing you wish you maybe could have told yourself while you were interviewing for the role?
Yeah. So I will say something about the PM interviews. The PM interviews, especially at Salesforce, are typically broken up into product, behavioral, and also analytical questions. So I would say, first thing is if you're not really familiar with PM type questions or analytical questions, it's always a great idea to hit those PM books and learn a little bit more about the role of a PM and also learn more about how, to structure your responses to these questions, what these questions look like. I think PM books like, Cracking the PM Interview, there's ones like Decode and Conquer, and they all have great strategies on tackling, mainly product and analytical questions. So you get a good sense of how to structure those responses when you're answering these questions. The only caveat I'd say is you don't want to mold yourself too tightly to the framework that they offer you. You really want to take the framework that they give you and kind of shape it to your own style of responses. So kind of find what works for you and structure your responses according to that. And also start thinking about your favorite products. So while you're at it, start thinking about products that you love. This could be software products, hardware products, any kind of even non-tech products, right? And kind of what makes you love them. And also think about products that you may not like as much and kind of what made you dislike them. So getting into that framework of thinking like a product manager beforehand is definitely very important. As far as the behavioral questions go, I would say this is where you really want to be yourself and speak to experiences that you've had in the past that make you a good fit for this PM role. So, whether it's entrepreneurial experiences, leadership experiences, even experiences when you've worked as a team, all of those experiences are super valuable. And I like to use the STAR framework. That's like the framework where you talk about the situation, talk about the task, you also talk about the action and the result. So kind of put that framework into some of your experiences when you're answering some of these behavioral questions.
That's awesome. I love how you say to kind of use like the guidebooks and some of these different resources, but to really make it your own as well, because I think it's so common too that folks will see some of these common PM questions online and just kind of think, okay, this is, the type of canned answer that somebody's going to want to hear. But I can't tell you how many times when I'm doing a recruiter phone screen and for some of my questions, folks will come back with a really interesting product and I haven't been able to make that connection previously. And it's just such an interesting way of thinking, even for your own usage. So definitely on board with making it your own. What are some common misconceptions about PMs in the interview process?
Yeah, I'd say the first one that I've heard a lot is there is this misconception that you always need to have some sort of computer science degree in order to be a PM, which is honestly not necessary. Even at Salesforce, I would say the main kind of experience is technical experience, and that can come through a variety of ways. So it doesn't necessarily have to come through a computer science degree. I've seen people, major in data science, cognitive science, even statistics, and really succeed in this role. I will say the technical experience is really, really valuable, especially as you're working on tech related products, you're working at a software company, and you're interacting with engineers and other technical folks on the team. So that technical experience is definitely valuable, but it doesn't have to strictly be a computer science degree. Another thing that I've heard from people is they need only PM experiences before hopping into a PM role. And I will say that I've seen people of various backgrounds kind of transition into this PM role. So, for example, for myself, I started off doing computer science related internships when I started. And I think my last computer science internship, that's where I was able to kind of explore more of the product side. It was at a startup. I was able to get involved in a lot of different areas. So that's kind of what helped me make that bridge between software engineering role and PM. And then I hopped into a PM role full time. So you definitely don't need to, especially for the internship program, strictly have PM experiences, as long as you can speak to some experiences that make you a really good fit for this type of role, even outside of internships. So maybe even through clubs or on campus activities or side projects. I think that's super helpful to speak to your abilities as a PM. The last one I'll mention, which usually comes up during the PM role, is that people assume that you're like, as a product manager, you're the manager of a team, which is not exactly true. You're not really managing your team, you're managing the product. So, what that means is you are kind of bringing the team together. They have their own managers. So, they're not going to be, you're not going to be managing them, but you're going to be kind of influencing the team to kind of move a product forward, but without being authoritative. So it's a really cool skill that you learn as a PM, how to like influence the team without authority.
Absolutely. Another question that came in around a little bit more about your interview process. I know, unlike Katie, who came in through also our internship program previously, Anska, you were coming in as a new grad, having your different experiences from internships throughout. So, how did you decide on Salesforce for your full-time role?
Yeah, so my experience was interesting. So when I was recruiting full time, I was highly conflicted between choosing like a regular PM role at a startup or going into an APM role at a larger company. And as a new grad PM, I personally felt it's important to find a company that has the resources in place to kind of mentor you and actually support your growth. And I also wanted, a place where I could speak to other PMs who've had varied experiences and learn from them. So I think the main thing for me was just making sure that the company had a very structured program so I can learn some of these skills. So, as a large company, I found that Salesforce had these resources in place. In fact, when I was interviewing during batch day, I remember like they put up a whole presentation very similar to what you're presenting today, Stephanie, around what the program entails, talking about the cohort experience, talking about the structure over the 2 years. And it really felt like, the team had a plan in place around kind of developing us as PMs. So, not only having us rotate across 3 teams at Salesforce, but also other activities during the APM program for us to engage with our cohort, learn from the APM core team, and learn critical PM skills, learn from other leaders, also be able to engage in personal development activities. So I felt like that dual-sided nature of this program was really, really beneficial, and I really felt like it had all the resources to support me. So yeah, definitely coming to the program, that was my perception. And definitely right now, as an APM in the program, I'd say it exceeded all those expectations.
That's awesome. So nice to hear on our end as well. But we do have one more kind of pre-submitted question, and it's a pretty long one. So bear with us here. What could a day in the life of an APM look like on any given day? So maybe just in general, not necessarily. I'm sure when it comes to your day-to-day, everything is changing so quickly. But I guess if you had to kind of give a paraphrase of maybe what it could look like in terms of some of the different groups and then also different areas that you're working on.
Sure. Well, to start off, I know there's this like common stereotype that PMs are always in meetings, which is actually very true. PMs are in several meetings, and this is pretty common, but it's actually very beneficial since the purpose of these meetings is to really ensure alignment across your team, making sure all your stakeholders are aligned, making sure you're communicating the right priorities. So it is true that PMs are in a lot of meetings, but that really speaks to that collaborative aspect of the role. So I really enjoy that, speaking to different team members, kind of hearing their thoughts. Another thing I realized during my role is, I'm never the one independently making any decisions. My job, I realized like most of the time I'm, socializing and communicating different ideas and decisions to people. And we collectively kind of come together to make a decision. So I think it's cool that I'm able to have these meetings, interact with people to actually hear their thoughts and ideas, and ultimately use that to weigh in on some of their opinions and make that final decision. So, through stand ups and other one on one meetings with our team members. Another thing I'll mention is that as a PM, you're also the face of the product and also the voice of the customer. So, when you're the face of the product, you're basically representing your product both internally and externally. So, you'll be engaging in internal demos, internal presentations this could be to your team, your broader team, or even executives, right? So executives who want to learn about what product you're working on, kind of how you're, furthering the mission of the company. And then you're also presenting externally to customers and other, external stakeholders. So as a PM, you do get to engage in a lot of demos and presentations, really hone those communication skills. And you're also involved with customers. So I'd say on a day-to-day basis, you're always thinking about the customer, responding to their requests, meeting with them, and really socializing your ideas with customers, and also finding new ways to kind of incorporate their ideas and their feedback into your products by relaying that feedback back to your team.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And that brings us into our Q&A session here. So I do want to be able to take an opportunity to introduce Katie, who's joining us this morning as well. Katie, if you'd love to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you so much to both of you for all of the amazing words that you've said so far. Hey, everyone. My name is Katie. I am also a member of the 2020 full-time APM cohort, which means I also started the year ago, right along with Avantika. So we're good friends. We work in the program together. But also I'm here to talk about the internship experience that I had in 2019 before I joined for full-time. So right now for full-time, I'm working on Sales Cloud. In 2019, I actually had the opportunity to work on Health Cloud within Salesforce Industries. And that was a product I didn't even know existed before I started my internship, but I had a great experience to work on that. Working on two different things, a vision project about where the where our product was going to go in the future, and also sort of an implementation project of improving what we already had out there to customers already. So it was a super varied experience. I got to have that great opportunity to meet my cohort, and many of us actually ended up coming back for full-time. So it's been a really, really great experience, internship and full-time. Happy to answer any questions. I will be focusing on internship stuff though. So send any questions our way, as you guys already have been. To kick us off, I actually wanted to ask Avantika a question. So one thing I always think about is it's so hard to know what to expect when you start any new job, and especially for APM, it was just hard really to know what to expect. So for you, starting as full-time, what was the most surprising aspect of the APM program?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Katie. I think, coming to the APM program, I really wasn't sure what to expect. I didn't know kind of whether I'd be treated as like a new grad PM, how that kind of plays out onto the team. What surprised me, and I think this is really a positive thing, is that the teams really embrace APMs, even though it's a fairly new program at Salesforce. The teams were very welcoming. And I love that they treat APMs as, any other PM on the team, right? You're almost treated as like a senior PM, really entrusted with a lot of responsibility and opportunities. And people don't necessarily think of you as more junior to them or more as a new grad or inexperienced. I love that everyone is super supportive. I think this was something I was a little bit afraid of, that, as an APM, you're coming in with, very little experience. People are going to look at you differently. But honestly, that's not how it is. I felt like the teams were really ready to embrace a new APM on the team, ready to support them. They had different team members in place to really help them onboard effectively and have that great relationship with the teammates. So I really love that experience. And I think as I did a whole rotation, I really felt like I was able to leave the rotation feeling like I actually made an impact on the team and had a significant role to play. And I think that's like a really cool aspect of the APM program. One other thing that's kind of outside of the teams is that I didn't realize how much of an opportunity we'd have, Katie, as APMs to kind of help shape the program ourselves, right? So we're able to get involved in APM activities, help onboard future cohorts of APMs, and also able to kind of shape the program, provide feedback to make this even better for future cohorts. So I really enjoyed that opportunity as well.
Nice. That's one thing too that I've just noticed from the recruiting side is just how many of you are so eager to raise your hand to be able to do sessions like this in terms of answering folks' questions. I know there's a lot of people that have been reaching out in pockets and just curious to know more about your experience. So always excited to be able to kind of bring this platform forward in terms of being able to get these out there in public. Another question that we are getting is around the internship program. So Katie, this one's definitely going to be for you, but can you tell us about why you chose Salesforce for your internship?
Sure. So it's been a little while, so let me think back. But I knew that I was interested in product management. I thought I was in a consulting role at the time for my previous summer internship, and I really wanted something that would give me that same variety and teamwork, but also a little bit more ownership of the final product. So I knew I wanted to go into product, and I also had a huge interest in computer science and technology. So it really seemed like the marriage of what I wanted to go into. For Salesforce in particular, a couple of things. For the first part, it really goes back to what Avantika was saying about how we really have the opportunity to shape the program for ourselves. We're only the second cohort ever of the APM program, and it's growing really fast. But at the time, I was so excited to be part of something that was going to be innovative and new, and that I would really have the chance to sort of blaze a trail with a cohort of like-minded individuals. And that's really been my experience so far. Being in that second cohort, I've loved sort of the innovative aspect of it, and the fact that I've been able to sort of have an impact and make this exactly what we wanted to be for ourselves. I like the small sides of it too. Having a small number of folks in our cohort, we get really close. And even in this virtual environment that we're in now, it really, really feels as tight-knit as anything else I've experienced in my academic or professional career. So it's a really, really special group of people. And then I think Salesforce as a company in particular really spoke to me. The B2B space was really interesting. I didn't know too much about it, but I love how much a part of its community Salesforce is. You can look into our 1-1-1 giving model, where we give 1% of our time, our equity, and our I forget the last part, sorry, but it's a corporate giving program, and it's really, really a real thing. We spend time volunteering in our community and really being a part of it. We have hubs right in the middle of cities all around the world, and it really just feels like you're a global citizen at Salesforce, and I really appreciated that. And so much of my day is spent helping people, whether that's jumping on the phone with customers and helping them unblock their business problems, or getting out into the community and volunteering through our volunteer time off program, or what have you, or helping future generations of APMs understand. I think so much of my day is spent doing what I value. So those are sort of the main things that drew me to it, and it really exceeded all my expectations.
Nice. And to speak to, being the second cohort, as you were mentioning too, we actually just had our first cohort from 2019 graduate a few weeks ago. And so we did a graduation ceremony in San Francisco. It was just nice to kind of see everyone come full circle and, graduate together after a few years in a virtual setting. But I think that our teams have done a really nice job in terms of trying to put together a curriculum and just activities throughout, outside of, just working in your individual product teams, to really still make sure that the APM cohorts are still feeling that connection with one another, and, also getting that mentorship piece. But really appreciate everything you just mentioned. It looks like we're also getting quite a few questions just around the recruiting timeline that I mentioned earlier. So to kind of reiterate how that stands for us, we do have the full-time roles that open in July, and then the internship roles in August. And with that, we are continuing to go through applications at that time. We are also currently interviewing in full swing. Because of the volume that we have, we do have it to where we aren't going to be able to open up the role again for next year's cohort. But if you are interested in, let's say you are applying for internships and interested in the full-time program the following year, then I'd encourage you to mark your calendars for July of next year. That's when the role is posted. And then if you're interested in the 23 internships as well, that would be for August. With that being said, there are still plenty of other opportunities to really practice up on some of these different PM skills that were mentioned from what Avantika was sharing. And hopefully that answers a little bit more about what that timeline looks like. A question here that I think could be good for both of you would actually be around just the technical aspects of your role. One of them specifically looks like, how much are you coding in your day-to-day?
Yeah, I'm happy to start off this question. And Katie, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. Personally, for me, I don't code at all in my role. If anything, I don't think I have access to code on my team. However, it is really important to be able to have a very tight and close relationship with your engineer and your engineering manager. So you're essentially, being very clear on your end as a product manager about what you're building, having the engineer really communicate to you kind of any questions that they have, any clarity, areas of clarification that they need from you. So I'd say even though you're not coding, you are essentially trying to communicate everything very clearly so they know exactly what to do. It's also important to be able to understand kind of what's feasible from more of a technical angle so that when you are, offering different solutions and thinking about what to build next, you really have like the engineer's best interest in mind and think more about like feasibility, what's actually going to be possible within the next release or two. And if you don't, at least having those conversations with them. So it is important to be technical in that aspect because you can really have these productive conversations with your engineers. But at the same time, you're not required to code.
Yeah, I would echo that 100%. I also don't do actual coding on our code base on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes I'll sort of play with some queries and stuff to grab some data to help inform my decisions about the product, but that's really not a huge part of my job. But Avantika is 100% right. How much you can communicate and understand the technology to a deep level will really play a huge part in your success. And that's why the technical background does end up being really important, whether that's something that you've learned in school or you're learning right there on the job. But the number one most important thing is how deeply can you understand your product and be able to make those judgment calls. So this is some advice that I sometimes give to people who ask me about this. Like, if you're thinking about different classes to take to brush up on your technical skills for PM, I do often say try to focus on classes that will teach you sort of the ideas and the concepts behind engineering, rather than necessarily focusing on specific implementations. So the more you can, go for those classes that teach you, these are generally the building blocks of a web application, and this is how it's working, and you can sort of be conversational in it. That's really going to be your most important technical skill. And that's really what I loved most about CS when I studied it. So I'm happy to be able to apply that in my job.
Nice. Yeah, I love the concept of learning more of the concepts rather than maybe just say memorizing some other pieces that you hope will be able to be applicable down the line. A few questions we have here too are also around eligibility. So for applications, we do have the APM program in the US. So for folks that are interested in applying from outside of the country, we do have some students who, are from other schools that are still able to get the sponsorship within the US to be able to work here. And we're still able to consider those folks. But I would say keep asking as well. If there's a case where maybe we can be asking for an international program, I'm sure that we'd be excited about that. But it is US based at this time. In terms of time, I know we're running up on that limit, but another question to kind of mash together here as I see a few more around just the advice for classes, as you were mentioning already, in terms of getting some of that exposure. Another piece too would just be maybe what is an area that really surprised you about your internship in full-time? I know that we already dove into that quite a bit, but in a virtual setting, is there anything that you feel like really stood out to you when we had to make that transition?
Yeah, I mean, I was starting off my new grad experience completely virtual. I actually have not met any of my teammates in person yet. So I know, Katie, you have like the in-person internship experience. So I'd love to hear kind of what your transition point was like. But personally, for me, I think in a virtual setting, you do need to be more intentional about more of the relationship building and really building trust and kind of establishing who you are on the team. I think as APM who's coming in virtually and also brand new, If you're already just going in and, telling your teammates exactly what to build and kind of what we should be doing, I think you're really taking that element of like relationships away and like, forgetting about establishing trust and credibility on the team. So I do think it's important as a PM, and this one did come as a surprise to me, like how important it is to actually reach out to people, introduce yourself, and actually get to know your teammates really well, kind of understand what their priorities are, kind of how they're doing. It's also important to check in on your teammates from time to time. So, in a virtual setting, a lot of these like other pieces of information do get lost easily. Another thing I noticed is that some information does get lost through the virtual setting, or things are repeated often. So I think what's really important is that you're not going to be just like hearing things on the side when you're in a real setting in person. Usually hear a lot of things communicated either by people walking to your desk or people communicating together in a group. But none of that happens in a virtual setting. So it is very important to be intentional about having those meetings, making sure you are communicating the right thing, making sure the other person has received the right important information, and the whole team is really aligned. I think that's something that I had to learn how to do as I was on the job.
I think that's really, really accurate. That was almost exactly what I was going to say. I think one thing that really stood out to me, and that has changed as we've gone into the virtual environment, is this is a leadership role. I think you come in here and you're like, okay, I'm a PM. I don't have actual authority over these engineers. We have to influence. All of that is 100% true, but you really do have to put yourself in the role of, I am in a leadership position. I am guiding this team forward, this team of engineers, and also cross-functionally, guiding them forward with my vision that I've developed collaboratively. So I think it's easy to forget that. It's easy to think of yourself as new. It's easy to think of yourself as, I'm the one with the least experience in the room, so I should sort of let other people jump in. But the more you can think of yourself as a leader and a culture carrier, the more successful you're going to be. I think that was one thing that I really got a crash course in during my internship. And that really did change and become even more important as we went into a virtual environment, because as Avantika was saying, it's so important to establish trust and be super intentional about that personal and professional relationship building. And as the leader of your team, you have to carry that culture. So it's so important. The most important meeting on my calendar is the daily 15-minute coffee chat that I have with my engineers that I hop into when we just chat about, what camping trip folks did over the weekend and what movies we're seeing. It sounds silly, but it's actually like the most important thing that I do during the day to have that sense of camaraderie. I'm sure many of you will have software engineering experience. It's really hard work. So the more that we can carry that caring culture and foster those personal relationships, the more successful the product is going to be. So I think transitioning into the virtual environment, I had to really take those leadership skills and really carry them forward.
Absolutely. It's been tough, but it's been really nice to see how everyone's been able to make that transition. So we do have time for one more question. And this one's a little bit more functional in a sense where folks are asking about what majors can find their ways into product management roles. I know Avantika touched on this a little bit at the beginning in terms of, there isn't one set path. But in regards to maybe some of your peers and other folks that you've chatted with, what are some of the majors that come to mind, and maybe even Katie on the master's side as well?
Sure. Yeah, I think this is a great question that comes up around kind of like what experiences make you stand out, and also the degrees. Speaking to my own experience, I did come in with a computer science degree and a business degree. And that dual degree was helpful for me because I was able to think along both aspects. As I said, right, you're going to be thinking more about the strategy and the business facing side of the product, but at the same time, you need to be a little bit more technical to communicate with, your engineering or design counterparts. So I do think there is value in having both a technical and, a business degree. However, that being said, it doesn't have to be one particular major. So I've seen people do, a dual major in economics and data science. They've even done statistics or cognitive science. So again, it's not super drilled on one major pathway. It's more about the experiences that you're building on top of the major that you pursue. So even if it's not strictly computer science, I've even seen people with like mathematics degrees because they're able to still be very technically sound and fluent in that area. So anything that lets you kind of be more analytical and think more rationally and structured, I think that really helps. Katie, I'd love to hear from you actually, because I know you did a master's degree. Kind of like, what master's disciplines do you think are helpful?
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. It's all about that analytical thinking. And that does come from computer science, but it also comes from those other degrees that you were mentioning. We have someone in our cohort as well who did mechanical engineering. So that all of those degrees are helpful, and there's a ton that you can learn on the job. So my background, I had a BA in economics, and at Stanford, they actually give you the opportunity to stick around for a 5th year and do a master's. So I ended up getting a master's in computer science. I did focus that in human-computer interaction, which I think was super relevant to the PM experience. So just a quick shout out to HCI in particular. If you're in CS and don't know what to focus in, HCI is an amazing route. So that's really like the design aspects and how to think about computers from a human-centric perspective. But yeah, so getting that master's degree was crucial for me. I will say that just having done economics, I don't think I really had the language of technology as much as I ended up learning it when I transitioned and ended up taking those master's courses. But I don't think having a master's prepares you any better or worse than my peers who don't have them. I just think it really allowed me to broaden my academic experience and get that CS language that I was looking for. So same thing that Avantika said, all sorts of technical majors will prepare you well enough. And pretty much there's a couple classes that definitely really helped from my CS curriculum, but most of what I do, I learned on the job.
Nice. Covered the whole gamut there. So a lot of different avenues on that end. But again, this is really an opportunity to be able to share more about your own experiences and also answer some of those questions that folks have had. To everyone who's watching this right now, thank you again so much for spending your mornings, evenings, wherever you are right now here with us. And also a huge thank you again to Katie and Avantika for choosing Salesforce, taking the time to chat with all of you, and then just being all around rockstar APM. So thanks all around, and we will hopefully catch you next week for the next Futureforce LinkedIn Student Live. Bye, everyone.